Good afternoon. I'm Joni Adamson, and I'd like to thank Abigail Perez and Vera Coleman for organizing these two linked panels. My title is Tracing Roots, Environmental Justice to Global Syndemic, and Building an Environmental Humanities Community of Purpose. The Humanities for the Environment Global Network, founded in 2013 and piloted by many of the scholars from North America and South America that are here today on these two linked panels, has had a very important announcement to make. Over the course of the past 3 years, we have successfully partnered with UNESCO to establish Bridges as a global sustainability science coalition. Bridges is a humanities center global coalition for knowledge and action based in UNESCO's Management of Social Transformation program. Bridges will be the go-to resource within UNESCO for expertise, advice, engagement, and endorsement from the humanities on sustainability science, education, policy, action, etc. This means that humanists will be in a position to influence climate and sustainability agendas at UNESCO in the next decade in ways that they have not been able to do on the international level to date. Bridges was organized and founded by 3 organizations: UNESCO's MOST, SIPISH, the International Council for Philosophy and Human Sciences, and Humanities for the Environment Global Network. In the presentation that follows, I want to examine what the Humanities for the Environment Network has learned about building local, regional, and international coalitions for knowledge and action. I explore how the field of the environmental humanities is what I describe as a community of interest. I define community of interest as humanists who are engaging with their colleagues across the disciplines to offer conceptual clarification, theoretical analysis, and critical exploration of who humans are, how they live, what motivates them, how they imagine and work for change, respond to risk, live in relationship to the non-human, and plan for the future. Environmental humanities as a field draws on anti-colonial, anti-racist, feminist scholarship and knowledges developed in diverse cultures and ontologies. I will also discuss what I call our emerging communities of purpose and examine the ways in which we are working to strengthen the world's ability to achieve the United Nations 17 sustainability goals for the decade of action from 2020 to 2030, and how Bridges will play a key role in this work. The beginning of the decade of action, 2020, has been truly challenging. As COVID has moved throughout the world, a virus, in a sense, has been live streaming or revealing dire truths about the many different human conditions and contagions that impact societies. Environmental humanists, whose research is rooted in the environmental justice movement, have long been making connections between complicated and disproportionate injustices of gender, race, and ethnicity, and the injustices exacerbated by climate change and industrial environmental poisoning to epidemic and illness. In a special issue of Bifrost Online, hosted by the Circumpolar Observatory, Stephen Hartman and I published an essay in which we explore how humanists as a community of interest and as a community of purpose have come together to think about what we call a new normal after COVID. Hartman and I argue that the term syndemic, defined as a synergy of epidemics that co-occur in time and place and interact with each other to produce complex pathological conditions, share common underlying societal drivers, and that this term offers humanists a new tool and new insight into the new normal. The groundwork and main arguments for this concept were put forward in a 2019 report of the Lancet Commission on the mutually intensifying links between obesity, malnutrition, and toxic pollution and its links to human health. The term provides a reasonable basis for understanding the present COVID-19 pandemic. Hartman and I link the concept of syndemic to environmental justice communities and to places such as the 85-mile industrial corridor along the Mississippi in Louisiana called Cancer Alley, and to Flint, Michigan. Both are predominantly African American communities where residents suffer comparatively high rates of pollution-linked cancer and health effects, which in turn, as we have seen in the last year, have placed them at heightened risk for serious infection from the novel coronavirus. Our essay illustrates how environmental humanities scholars, as a community of interest, have long read the literature of environmental justice for insights on the connections that contribute to what we might call a syndemic. Ana Castillo's 2005 novel, So Far From God, for example, captures the spirit of the environmental justice movement in her representation of a small New Mexican community where a toxic factory has been sited and sons and daughters of the community are being lost to toxins. Latinx and Navajo mothers who have lost children transform a Catholic Way of the Cross religious procession into an environmental justice toxic tour, if you will. At each stop in the procession, they lament babies born with brain damage and cancer clusters they understand to be linked to the toxins being released by a factory located near their community. Quote, "We care about saving the whales and the rainforests," they declare, but, quote, "we, as a people, are being eliminated from the ecosystem too." The Way of the Cross March helps to illuminate why so many BIPOC or Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities have been calling for communities of action or purpose that do more than witness or reflect on injustice. These communities have been calling for fair policing both before and after the death of George Floyd. Castillo's fictional mothers anticipate the unbearable grief now being felt around the world for George Floyd, who called out for his mama in the last minutes of his life. His words and his death have invoked the grief of Black and brown mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters who have lost family members in escalating numbers to police violence and now also to COVID. While statistically we have an incomplete picture of the toll of COVID-19 in the United States, the existing data, as analyzed by an APM research lab, reveals deep inequities when viewed by race. According to their research, Black Americans are dying at rates 2.4% higher than whites, while Indigenous Americans are dying at rates 8 times higher. These increased mortality rates are linked to underlying health conditions such as diabetes, cancer, and hypertension, which in turn are often linked to historic traumas and accumulated stressors. Like So Far From God, Lucy Tapahanso's The Women Are Singing, although creative writing, fiction, poetry, and short stories rather than scientific articles, helps us to understand better the meaning of accumulated stressors resulting in these horrifying pandemic statistics. Tapahanso connects emergence or creation stories about Si'i, or the place of emergence, to historical stories about the Long Walk. In 1864, Kit Carson, who is remembered in mainstream American history as a hero, but by the Dene as a murderous villain, rounded up 8,000 Dene, killed all their sheep, and burned their gardens. Carson's troops forced the Dene to walk more than 300 miles from their homes to a desolate military fort in southern New Mexico. Many died along the way, and many were murdered. Those who survived had only brackish river water to drink, and the military issued starving families white flour, sugar, and lard to supplement their meager crops. When they were finally allowed to return home, they were never allowed to return completely to their traditional foodways, and government-distributed processed foods continued to be staples in their diet. Today, among the Dene, these historical traumas remain, taking the form of ongoing food and housing insecurities and high rates of cancer linked to intensive coal and uranium mining. Long-term food insecurities and high rates of type 2 diabetes are also among the factors that are linked to the reasons why the Navajo Nation remains a food desert with only 13 full-service grocery stores on the 27,000 square mile Navajo Nation. These accumulated stressors help to explain why, in the spring of 2020, the Diné were the population with the highest COVID infections per capita in the United States. Through the organization of networks such as Humanities for the Environment, humanists are aspiring to form what Hartman and I call in our essay, communities of purpose. These communities of purpose address accumulated stressors and seek to build community capacity to meet complex challenges. As Giovanna DeCiro explains in her analysis of the ways that academics and activists can work together successfully, it is the responsibility of academics to reveal the innovative ideas, voices, perspectives, and hope-filled actions and network-building practices of activists working to materialize, quote, the conditions of possibility for social and environmental change, unquote. Building communities of purpose that materialize the conditions for change is the goal of networks like Humanities for the Environment and scientific coalitions like Bridges. For example, one of the new projects we are working on in the North American Observatory will address global syndemic by connecting food system disparities, COVID-19 risks, social inequities, and racial, ethnic, and gendered injustices. We will seek to address food systems challenges in the Phoenix River Valley, with particular emphasis on food deserts and food insecurities in marginalized and BIPOC communities in arid regions. We are exploring how a diverse array of factors that have long been studied within humanities, including race, ethnicity, gender, age, ability, economic position, and geography, influence the ways in which individuals and groups experience and react to complex social and environmental challenges. Working with local groups and organizations around Arizona who are innovating models of successful response to food insecurities, we hope to provide models for other communities around the world to follow. This is only one example of the kinds of HFE projects that seek to integrate environmental humanities communities of interest with emerging communities of purpose to strengthen the world's ability to achieve the United Nations 17 sustainability goals for the decade of action. It is my hope that this presentation has helped to reveal how the hope-filled actions and network-building practices of HFE is working to materialize the conditions of possibility for social and environmental change and address the linked epidemics of what we might now call global syndemic. Thank you so much.